It always cuts up short. Good evening, good morning, good afternoon to everyone who's joining us today. Welcome to Open Mic UK. From the troop side, I have Kathy and Susie with me. We're all in different parts of the world, and today we have a special guest, Emma Mitchell. Emma, I'm not gonna introduce you. I'm gonna allow you to introduce yourself. I know you do amazing work in terms of astrology, but I'll leave that to you. So welcome, Emma.
Thank you. And aloha. It's good to see you all. I mean, I know you all for many years in different ways, right? But it's so good to see you and be all here together. Oh, it's always a bit daunting, isn't it? I always feel like I've got that elevator pitch. I'm like, oh my gosh, I have a minute to describe who I am. It's a lot. People always go, Emma does all that. I'll keep it short. I mean, I call myself a creative and spiritual guide for women in midlife and beyond, and guide people to understand themselves, Ramsey, really, and who they are. Because I think we often forget, life takes over and responsibilities and the external world often may subdue our soul path. So I weave in a lot of ancient traditions and lineages, and I'm that ever student. So shamanic astrology is one of my defaults for sure that I love supporting people with. I'm also a numerologist, sound healer, clinical aromatherapist, creative visual guide, yoga teacher. So there's, as you can see, that's just a few of the lineages that I weave together. And really, I guess my foundation is helping people understand who they really are. And I found astrology to be a really great foundation for that. I have to say, as a default, I've only been really studying it and certified the last 9-10 years, which is a drop in the ocean, because astrology is such a massive subject, isn't it? I always joke that the more I learn, the less I know, because it's just mind-boggling and a little overwhelming, let's be honest. And that's, I think, one of the last modalities I took a deep dive into, because my brain couldn't hold that information earlier on. I studied more plant-based and earth-based modalities with the plant medicine and clinical aromatherapy, because it was more tangible, less heady. And I think we'll all admit, I don't know how you, Ramsey and Susie and Kathy, when we talk about astrology, there's so much, right? Yeah.
Yes, absolutely. There's so much, and I know you did my charts, and I still don't get it all. And I went back and I listened to it and I looked at the chart. There's so much into it that, at least for me, I find it overwhelming, but it is so on the point that is sometimes scary.
Yeah. And look, you're not alone. Even me, I still get overwhelmed. And that's why I'd like to think that I just give spoonfuls. And I think if we start off with like the basics of what astrology is and what the birth chart is, because there's so many different names for different things. So maybe would that be useful to kind of share? Is that a good place to kind of share and start there? Because some people might say, well, what is astrology? And that's woo-woo and made up stuff, and it's not really true. And I think we all default to the newspapers, I'm aging myself, or the magazines, right, with the zodiac sign. And we go, oh, I'm a Taurus sun, and we read it and we go, well, that's a load of gobbledygooch, because how can everybody reading the Taurus sun sign be the same? So astrology is not that. It's an ancient study of the sky and the planets and the sun and the moon and these celestial bodies, and looking at these cycles and patterns of their movement. Now, there are many forms of astrology. I've touched a little on Vedic, which is Eastern Indian, and they follow more the moon in and something called nakshatras. So it's very different to Western astrology, which is my study, which most people I think will have a feeling of, because they follow the zodiac signs, which are 12, and the seasonal flow of the earth and the sun and the moon's rotation, right? And so we tend to know, the Aries begins the astrological year, and from there we go all the way around the zodiac. So there's 12 signs in the zodiac, and then when we're born, that birth chart or the natal chart is almost like a photograph or a screenshot of our relationship to those planets and the sun and the moon moving around. And it's literally our imprint. It's our first breath and our connection of where we came from. And it holds this kind of map or a blueprint of the qualities and energies and our relationship with those planets. And in this birth chart, it's a circle. There are 12 houses that follow the zodiac signs. And the houses look like pieces of a pie of this circle. They're all broken down into segments, 30 degrees. If we think of a circle being 360 degrees, each of these segments or houses from 1 to 12 are the areas of your life where the energy is influencing you. And so everybody's birth chart is different, Ramsey. The photograph, the screenshot is unique because everything in the sky is changing minute by minute. So I'm a twin. My twin sister and I, although we're born either side of midnight, but our charts are very, very different. But we have the same sun sign, the same moon sign, the same rising sign, these big 3 placements, which is where I would invite people to start. Understand your sun sign, understand your moon sign, and understand the ascendant or the rising. It's called the primal triad, or these kind of big 3 qualities. But I'm very different to my twin sister. Even those minutes can change the qualities when you get adapt to understanding your birth chart. And then there's obviously the personality, right, that plays into that. Yeah, which is making everything unique. So does that help a little bit? So when we look at the birth chart, it is overwhelming, but I would invite people to begin actually with their moon. And why do I say that? Well, in Western astrology, it's often starting with your sun, which is the vitality and the life force energy and how we bring that energy every day. And it's very young. It's the doing part of our being. Does that make sense? And I think we're conditioned generally in the West to be action oriented from school. I don't know about you all, but it's always like, well, what's Emma doing? And, what are you taking action on? We're driven by the external energy. The moon, on the other hand, is our most intimate, emotional, supportive intelligence, more the yin aspect, if we're thinking about energy or qualities of energy, right? I think most people here listening would understand the yin and the yang energy state. So the sun definitely holds qualities of where we shine and where our energy can be shared. And we want to honor the sun, because if we don't, it often shows that we're depleted, or we're depressed, or lethargic, or we're feeling lost in life. So if somebody comes to me and says, Emma, I'm feeling really stuck, I will look at their sun placement and we'll have a conversation, well, how are you aligning with that? How are the qualities playing out? But the moon is where we come back to ourselves. It's like a big hug. It's like coming home. It's that intuitive knowing and our emotional needs of what we all come back to. My daughter in England, you know, she's almost 21 and typical student, burns the candles at both ends. And I'm always going, Lily, just do your moon. She knows enough about her birth chart to go, Mom. But I go, do your moon placement, Lily. Do that Taurus moon. Come back to self, slow down, have a hot bath, you know, light a candle, treat yourself to a takeaway, your nourishing food, all those home comforts. So personally, I really align with the moon with people when they come to me, and we have a moon wisdom community that I offer, because I think if we align with the rhythms and the cycles of the moon, it teaches us the ebb and flow of life. It's impossible to sustain doing your sun, right? It's like having the foot on the accelerator all the time. We get burnt out. It's just ridiculous. So we need the balance and that integration of the sun and the moon. So knowing your moon sign is very, very important.
Can I butt in here as somebody who really struggles with grasping the astrology? It's my least strong point, and I'm always trying to kind of let a little bit more, you know, come in. My first question is, when you're doing the chart, is it based on your time of birth as well as your date of birth, or is it not relevant?
All of that, and the location. So it's time and space, Susie. So most people know where they're born, the locality, the country, the town, the village. Yeah. And then the date of birth is important, obviously. Now, the timing can be hit and miss. A lot of people don't know their time of birth. What happens, we can rectify or do a chart. There are ways around looking at that. And I won't go into the detail because it's a bit mind-blowing. But we can, as astrologers, if somebody says, I don't know the time of birth, I would say, well, was it morning or evening? And if they really don't know, we tend to go with midday, the sun at the highest point. And it shifts a little bit of the exactitude of the planets, but we can look at the sun and the moon quite accurately. The moon changes every 2.5 days. So, you know, it wouldn't matter too much on the moon placement with the time of your birth, but the date and the location, absolutely. So it's time and location based.
Yeah. Okay. Because are there similarities then, would you notice, from when you do people's charts and you get to know, you know, people of similar, like, I know everybody's birth chart is different from what you're saying. Obviously, it's unique to their time, place, and date of birth. But do you see similarities, like when people have, you know, something in the same house or something like that? Can we kind of meet people that are similar to us or maybe completely opposite? Like, are things like that in play as well?
Absolutely. I mean, I get asked a lot on to do a synastry or composite chart, which we often look at, say, partners or business partners or friends or relationships. And people may have the same sun sign or the moon sign. There will be qualities. The house placement, you're right. And then the geometry, or what we call the aspects. So say Susie, you've got the same sun sign as me, Taurus, and the same moon, Scorpio moon, but the houses, it's a different place in the wheel, this circle. So, you know, if it's a 90-degree angle, that's called quite a tense aspect. That may change how people show their sun sign, right? So it's a yes and no type of I personally, in shamanic astrology, would look at the nodes of the moon, and I may well look at somebody's Venus or Mars being in a certain sign. So these personal planets tend to play out daily, you know, as because they're traits within us. So people that have the same Venus in a sign or a house, Venus is what we value, and it's the love and the beauty and the relationships, whereas Mars, a personal planet of our will and our drive and our motivation. So I often will look for placements of personal planets in signs, and I think there's, for me, I found a similar pattern playing out in that.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's probably not as simple as that, in fairness. And that's why I love it, because everybody's so unique, right? I mean, there's so much to it. But the nodes of the moon, if I'm just jumping a moment, and stop me if I'm going too much, but these nodes of the moon are like magnets. So they're energy fields, and every planet has them, but they pull the direction of the sun and moon and the earth and create eclipses. And they're an important part of astrology. And the north node is the direction of our soul opening up. And the south node is where we've come from, the past, and holds the gifts and our qualities. And these nodes are important in a chart, because I look, often people with the same north node or a south node are often said to come from the same soul group or past lives. Yeah. And so for me, in shamanic soul-based astrology, that interests me a lot, is looking at the placement of people's nodes of their moon.
We did a little bit of that work in one of your groups, and it was hard for me to wrap my mind around, but it seems, I want to learn more because it seems really big. Susie, we also did a composite chart in Janet's group based on where each of our asteroid Magdalena was, and the, you know, you could see, I think there was a lot to learn by who you were next to, you know, because when you know this, the whole group, and then there, you know, I was put next to Jonathan, and so I was thinking, all right, so yeah, we do have those things in common. It was an interesting experiment with, you know, how many, 45 or 50 people, all on one chart, and we put our names and in what sign and in what house, and we could have had little groups come out of it and learn from that. I'm sure that was really fun.
Definitely. And thanks for reminding me, Kathy. And I also think the element places quite a strong quality and similarity. So we've got the houses, we've got the signs, the zodiac signs, but the element, so is it a fire sign? Is it a water sign? Is it an earth sign or an air sign? That often the similarities, because that shows us how the qualities of the energy is moving through people. So often earth signs have similar qualities. You know, they're grounded, they're embodied, they're tangible, a little bit more practical. I mean, I'm generalizing, but when you talked about similarities, I'd probably go to the elements, actually. And water signs, you know, the general qualities of water signs would be they're intuitive, they're sensory, they're feeling oriented, you know, a little bit more empathic, certainly intuitive, because they work in the vibrational fields. Very different energy to earth, because earth's, you know, think of the clay, right? Both of them go down and in, and fire and air very different. They go up and out, a lot more dynamic and action oriented. So that's interesting to look at. I probably think there'd be a lot more alignment in the qualities of how people play out their signs and their birth chart in the elements.
Can we just check in, because there is a question from Tanita asking, do you work with Vedic astrology, or maybe even if you could give the differentiation between the shamanic astrology versus the Vedic astrology? How do those differ?
Hugely. And yeah, Tanita, it's a great question, that. So Vedic astrology, I only touch a little. I have a very good friend that does Vedic astrology, by the way. And I've only touched a little, partly from my yogic background. The Vedic astrology focuses on the moon placements, and they divide the birth chart into these almost squares, 28 to 29, called nanchakras, that are based on the moon placement. And it's very, very different to Western based astrology. Yep. So you can't really compare them, because your sun sign in Western astrology may change in Vedic. And then often people go, who am I? And what does that mean? So if we're open-minded, there's no wrong or right. There is no, chart that's going to tell you everything. I always invite people to explore or go with what they're guided to be drawn towards. So, I can share a couple of sources, and I think knowing the astrologer is important, because how they interpret that information and then communicate it, we need to resonate with that. I feel, sure, like you all, I've had a lot of astrology readings in myself. Some have been a bit nah, whereas others have been amazing, because I understand how that astrologer is communicating the information. Yeah, we're on the same kind of page, if that makes sense. So I would invite Tanita to kind of explore, maybe get word of mouth or a recommendation, and maybe a free consultation before they dive into one form of astrology. But if it's Vedic she's interested in, it's fascinating. I don't know that much about it, and I'm certainly not qualified to do a reading. Yeah.
We had a Vedic astrologer on our last retreat in Ireland, actually, Brent Beckvar. And it was really good for me at the time to be like hanging out with him for about 10 days, because he just is living and breathing it as much as you are. Like everything he references is in relation to, through the, I suppose, the lens of Vedic astrology. So like in the end, I had to totally surrender and really try to pay attention, because otherwise I don't think we could have communicated at all. Like, so, and he's been doing it for over 40 odd years. Like, so, he's a really good source. I don't know whether he still does people kind of individually, but, I think finding somebody, like you said, who's, living and breathing their one is the key thing. But I'm really, when I saw shamanic astrology, I was like, wow, how does that really, what does it give you that's different then?
Yeah, that's a great question, and I get asked it a lot. So there are so many forms of astrology. My take on shamanic astrology is that we work with all of the chart holistically. And all of the elements. So there's not one particular area of the chart that has a stronger importance, because as what is a shaman? Again, that's a whole loaded question, isn't it? But shamanic astrology to me is that we embody all of the planets, all of the qualities, all of the energies, and we work holistically as much as we can. And I'm very practical in that I help people embody it and live it day to day. I'd like to think that. So I may give some breathing exercises or interweave it with maybe an oil or a tincture, and say, or a plant, or even just going outside. I'd like to think that I bring it down and in, and how do we live it so it's not so heady and intellectual. And one of my teachers, Tyler Pennor, a youngish guy from the west coast of America, amazing. His mum was an astrologer, and his school is called the Living Sky. And that's what he did. You'd go outside and follow the change of the moon and the seasons and live it in harmony with nature. So as above, so below, right? So it's just because I think with sophisticated software It's amazing because we can digitally bring up a chart by the touch of a few fingers, but are we living it? What does that flat like imprint on the screen tell us? Not a lot, really, in how we live our life. Whereas I'd like to help people in what do these cycles of energy in your birth chart mean, and how can you live that in accordance with the soul's path? So to me, that's kind of shamanic astrology from my perspective. Yeah, Susie.
Love it. I love that holistic approach.
Yeah.
Ramsey,
Emma,
we're not giving you a chance to get a word in edgeways.
No, that,
yeah, Emma's the best to talk with. I think Emma does a really great job at distilling down these ideas. I've had my chart read so many times, but I can more understand it with Emma. And also the way, can you talk to us about why the creativity part? Because working with you, there might be writing prompts or finding images or colors that you mentioned, the sense really makes it real.
Right. I've found, and look, I am not an artist per se, Kathy, like you, but
I disagree.
okay. Okay.
Just claim it. Yeah, we're all artists.
I guess so. That is true. That's my old patterns, right? And the teachers at school going, what is that? Because my twin sister worked for the BBC and is very creative. So there's me. So that's the comparison syndrome. Okay, we'll delete that. We're all artists. I found the symbolic language, which really astrology is a symbolic language. It's, you know, any language is difficult to learn. So when we put image and color and playfulness to it, and I get people exploring what is their sun sign mean, and bringing the color and just doodling in their journal, it begins to sink in a playful beginner's mind. And it takes the overwhelm, like Ramsey said, and the overthinking and the complicated and analyzing of what does this really mean into something fun. And I think we come from a different approach and we begin to understand it. And so, yeah, I love doing that. And every year I offer something different. It's a different way of working, and something's brewing. It's not quite settled in yet, but helping people understand and live their birth chart through a journal and going through the sun in a community in image and color and playfulness is what I love. Because that's me. I'm beginning again every day, really. Like Ramsey, you said, even me, you know, I look at my birth chart. I don't really understand all of it, even now. And I think that's also the beauty and the mysticism, right? And the intrigue to keep coming back again and back again, and living it and experiencing it. So yeah, I mean, I've got journals all over with image and color, and because that to me, I can then go back and look at it like an oracle, Kathy, really, right? And it's personal. People play with image and color and paint and journaling in their own way and make it their own. So that's what I think is important.
I have a question. You mentioned the moon. How does the moon affect us along the phases? Because it goes through, I think, 4 phases, if I'm not mistaken. And we just passed through the Hunter moon, was a super moon for October. So how does all of that work with our psyche? Or if not, it's how it affects us personally or on an individual basis?
Yeah, that's a great question. So there are actually 8 phases, Ramsey, but the 4 are the typical that we know, right? The new and the full, and then the cross quarter, when the moon's cut in half, because we can see it in the sky. So, and they're roughly about a week apart, but then I'm doing this for people, but those in between, like crescent and half crescent. So simply put, the moon teaches us a lot about our creativity, about our sleep, about our intuition and guidance. So the liminal spaces of the unconscious. So if we think of the sun as being more the conscious mind, and the moon being more our unconscious or psychic, if we follow the moon on our own moon, so knowing the sign it's in and knowing the element, every year we'll get one moon, new moon in that and your moon, and one full moon, but then we get the opposite energies. So I think starting with following the moon phases is important. So knowing the sign of your moon, knowing the element, and then knowing the phase. Am I born at a new moon? That's easy to look at in your birth chart because the sun and moon are together. So if your sun and moon are together, either in the same house or within a certain degrees, you're born at a new moon. If the sun is directly opposite the moon in your birth chart, that's a full moon, right? They're phasing off. And so I'm born at a full moon. It's easier to see. But we can track that through the birth chart. If it's a 90 degrees, that's the first quarter or the third quarter moon. So each of these phases has a quality of energy. So at a new moon, we're birthing. And so if you're born at a new moon, maybe you're really good at beginning things. And maybe that energy at the time of a new moon ignites your psyche, your creativity, your intuition. Yeah, all these non-linear, more kind of right brain aspects in your line of work and here in the Spirit Cafe. Yeah, knowing your moon phase would be really important. And then play with it. I mean, track it for maybe 3 months. You know, look and how are you feeling during the first quarter moon, about a week later. That's an adjusting point because the moon's cut in half and the first quarter, it's a square, actually. It's this 90 degree, and squares invite us to do something, create change. So if you're born at that first quarter moon, maybe you're really good with change, or maybe you get a little bit restless with projects or your life, and you constantly need the change and the excitement. The last quarter is a little bit different because we integrate, and maybe you assimilate and you can put things together and you creatively work differently. They all have very, very unique qualities to the phases of the moon. So it's a great question. There are a lot of resources that are available, but I would begin knowing what sign is your moon in, and then what is that element, and pay attention to what's coming up. So we have the new moon tomorrow. I mean, I kind of purposely chose this date because it's my moon. Actually, I'm born with a Scorpio moon. I love this time of the year. And Scorpio, for all of us, the new moon tomorrow is beginning a new 29.5-day cycle. So that's when we want to kind of sink in, rest, let go of the last 29.5 days. And then within a couple of days, we don't have to do it on the new moon, but within the first 2 or 3 days of that light of the new moon, take your journal and write out maybe 3 intentions or sacred desires that you want to plant and let it go. Yeah, they could be mantras or just sentences that align with the quality of the moon. So tomorrow, the Scorpio moon, it's water. It's very much about a deep connection to transformation. So, and from our feeling point of view, so maybe what feelings and emotions do we all need to let go of? Or transmute, maybe a fear or a holding on or a clinging, something that started actually back in May. So we had, this full moon in Scorpio in May. Now we've got this new moon in Scorpio planting these intentions that are going to grow over the lunation, which is the moon cycle, 29.5 days, but then over a bigger cycle, 6 months, and a bigger cycle of 3 years. So yeah, there are cycles within cycles. And I think that's useful for living our life, right? And certainly being in tune with our psyche, our creativity, our sleep, our emotions. So certain people, I think, are very sensitive to full moons because the light is heightened, and things get illuminated. And that can be a little bit more restless. I've often heard people find full moons, it's hard to sleep. You know, we tend to hear of those old mythologies that the werewolves come out. Whoa, people get a little bit crazy at the full moon, energies get heightened, right? And that can be true to a certain extent, but then if you're born with a full moon, that might be a really powerful time for you to tune in, and quieten all the external. So individual, but it's a great question. I think the 4 phases certainly begin with that, the new moon and the full moon. The full moon, we let go, we kind of adjust, things get illuminated, we go, oh gosh, what we planted at the new moon, 2 weeks later we get an opportunity to let some things go, realign, reset, till that disseminating or the kind of dark phase again. So we have the waxing, new to full, growing, the waxing light, and then the waning light, full, back to new. Yeah. So typically the waxing, new to full, a little bit more action. That would be the time to do projects or, plan, outward things. Waning, perhaps more integrating, reviewing, assimilating, retuning. But I would say to people, play with it, to your listeners and the viewers, just start there. But I put a lot of relevance on the moon because it's so personal, and it teaches us about the in-breath and the out-breath. And that to me is holistically living, right, in alignment with the moon. Yeah. So
I have just a follow-up one. You said a new moon is happening in Scorpio sometimes now.
Yeah, November 1st, depending where you are in the world, of course. So we always get 2.5 days, but yes.
So, and we're going into the Halloween night, which was given to us by Susie and her ancestors. It came from Ireland. That is celebrated around the world. So how does that, or is there any correlation between the two, since they're happening almost at the same time?
That is a great question. So thank you. Yeah, Susie, and the Celtic traditions or the pagan traditions. Yes, definitely living in alignment. They are solar based, so they're sun based traditions. So Samhain or Halloween or the Day of the Dead, I mean, it's been celebrated, but this October 31st night, in Celtic traditions, Samhain is the beginning of the new year, and it's the darkest point of the year, and it's related to the sun Ramsey. So we've got the lunations, the moon phases and the new moons, and then we have the wheel of the year, which is eightfold as well. So from Beltane, Imbolc, Lammas, Mabon, all the way. But it begins with Samhain, which it has been moved a little bit. Now, here's where I don't want to, we as a culture have given the first of these, like November 1st, February 1st, May 1st, as these points in the wheel of the year, or these sun solar gateways. It really accurately, it's when the sun reaches 15 degrees of a sign that indicates the gateway. So from an astrological point of view, that will be November the 5th or 6th, not actually November 1st. But typically in culture, it's easier to just do the first of the month, really, for these gateways. And they do align. I mean, this solar gateway, the sun and the moon are in relationship all the time. but the sun dictates how much dark we have on our planet and how much light. So obviously I actually fly to Australia on Monday, see my twin sister, and they're going into spring, right? I mean, it's so opposite. Here in the northern hemisphere, we're coming into kind of the darkest point of the wheel of the year. And that's in old traditions. It was separated by how much light and how much dark. Yeah. So it's unusual that we have a new moon on November the 1st, falling in alignment. It doesn't always happen like that, Ramsey, but this year it is, which I think makes it even more interesting and potent, personally. And there's a lot more else happening in the sky. I have to say that, with other planets going on.
What's happening? Do tell. Well, anyways, there's a lot of shift around the globe. From different perspective, whatever it is, it's happening. How does or is it correlated, or can it be seen from before? I know we had Emma on the show a year ago almost, and she said, oh, well, there's going to be a shift and all these stars in aligned and so on, and everything will come to a settle by, I think, 26 or 27. But again, she's looking at it from a different perspective.
Yeah.
And seeing that everything that is happening today around the world, would have that been seen from a astrological point of view, and where would it see it ending, or is there a new beginning that is about to flower soon, or how do you see that? I know, sorry, I didn't mean to put you into a predictive question, but
no, it's a great question, and I mean, I get asked a lot. I will just, from my perspective, do the planets dictate what happens on Earth? No, not really. Our consciousness does, and the consciousness of the planet, right, and all of us, and how we collectively, but they have qualities of energy. We don't know how that's going to play out per se, but we can mirror it on patterns from the past. I don't do predictive astrology or what they call mundane often, but I'm interested in it. But I can share from my perspective what I know in regards to certain planets and the transits unfolding. And all astrologers are watching these transpersonal planets, or the outer planets: Pluto, Neptune, Uranus. And we didn't know about them, actually. You know, traditional astrologers just thought there were 7 main planets, because it's all they could kind of view through a simple telescope or watching the stars. And then obviously we come to know that there's so much more out there that we don't know about. I believe that as our consciousness on the planet rises, then we get to understand other forms of energies that are out in our galaxy and the universe. But Pluto and Neptune and Uranus have all been discovered, and we know about the qualities because of patterns from the past. Now, let's look at now. Let's start with the here and now, Ramsey. In November 1st, 2024, we have Pluto, who is the slowest outer planet. He's way out. His orbit is roughly about 246 to 48 years. That's how long it takes to orbit. So we don't live through a personal Pluto transit. Collectively, we all are born with Pluto in a sign from a generation point of view. And there are patterns with Pluto of transformation, regeneration, life, death, and rebirth. He's like the bulldozer, right? He's like that big arctic going through and digging up. And that's his job, is to unearth truth and things that have been hiding and lurking deep down in the psyche, in our structures, in our world. Pluto has been in Capricorn for the last 16 years, roughly, 2008. He's about to leave Capricorn and move into Aquarius for the next 20 years. So if we think about these cycles, that's a big deal. None of us have ever lived through Pluto being in Aquarius in our lifetime. We may have been embodied in a different form, because it was 1770s, right, the last time. So this is interesting. And the end of a cycle, think of as closing out a big book we've been reading and digesting and living in. That's a lot of energy that's built up to this last degree. And a lot of astrologers call it the anaretic degree. It's like urgent and it's critical. I like to call it the shamanic degree, because we get an opportunity to choose how does that play out in our own life. We can't really control what's going on out there, but we can certainly influence our own day-to-day life and the collectiveness of energy, as Susie knows through meditation, right? The collective consciousness. But we are going through either individual rebirth and transformation, and certainly collectively. And Capricorn is the structures of our world, politically, economically, you know, you could go on and on. And we've seen it play out, and we're seeing it play out in power struggles. Pluto is powerful, power over, power under. So we're living through the last few weeks. It moves out of Capricorn round about November the 18th, 19th, for good. We're done with it. He's been dancing back and forth. No more will we live through Pluto in Capricorn. So earth-based energy to an air-based energy. Aquarius is air, and it's fixed air, and it's about our individuation, our uniqueness, and how we're moving as humanity and consciously in new ways, thinking in a whole new way. It's kind of exciting and daunting, right, at the same time. And is it easy? No. Is it controlling us? No. Can we decide what we and how we work with the energy? Definitely yes. And I think awareness is key, isn't it? And the best thing people can do, because Pluto is very, very tense at this new moon tomorrow and the next few days. It's opposing Mars. Pluto and Mars are the guardians or the rulers of Scorpio. It's very volatile, Ramsey. It's everywhere on the planet. It is. Yeah. But I believe it's part of the Earth and the new Earth's changing. And the restructuring of the old has to die away to make room for a new consciousness coming in, however we describe it. So everybody look, if you know your birth chart, look for your own Capricorn placement, the house, and Aquarius, because that's been lit up with transformation and regeneration. Yeah, and that's just beginning big changes that are happening next spring. Yeah, we've got Saturn and we've got Neptune moving signs. Saturn moves signs about every 2.5 years, so it's not that unusual. But Neptune, that's a big deal. 164-year cycle. And being in Pisces, about 12 years, I think. Don't quote me, but moving out of Pisces, the last sign in the zodiac, into Aries, the beginning seed point. Just for a few months, we get a little flavor, not fully going to move till 2026. So next year, 2025, is a time that we've never lived through, ever, any of us. We don't really know what's going to happen, but we can see these patterns playing out. And I'd like to think Neptune is the higher energies of Neptune are intuition, empathy, forgiveness, and moving into Aries, that we have leaders, people that are consciously aware in new ways. Let's trust in that. there are lower energies to all of these planets and signs, and the illusion and the distortion and is that true, what's happening, can become heightened, which is why we all need to know who we are. We all need to be more conscious, and I think your Spirit Cafe and all your beautiful work is so important. I think meditating, finding the still point within, knowing your center, is really vital, because we can get drawn into the chaos of all this change, and change it must, and change it will. So you're right that there's a lot happening, Ramsey.
I know change is part of nature itself. The only constant in the universe is change itself. And change is never easy, because as humans, we love our comfort, normality, if you want to call it, or usualness of certain things. And all of a sudden, everything is disrupted. So, yes, you're right. We have to just understand who we are. And using your charts, we actually know where we stand, which helps
Correct.
us out.
Little bit of a map. I know. I think one of my teachers said, instead of going with the flow, we're flowing with the go, and using your map, your birth chart, to know when to respond, when to kind of come back into ourselves, and kind of following the energies, right? And it helps read the energy, and then we get to choose better, right? I think if we know better, we can choose better. But you're right, change, it's the unknown, isn't it? We don't know. And any astrologer that says that's going to happen for sure, we don't know. We're in very uncertain times.
But
Can
usually,
we-
if you're, yeah, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, go finish your thought, because you're on a roll. I'll come in and ask you.
No, that's fine. That's fine. You go ahead.
Well, I always have in front of me one of the lovely elixirs that Emma Kupu Mitchell has made, and I have oils, and as much as the chart and the whole stuff that we can do nothing about is happening anyway, I'm all about what you're saying in terms of empowering ourselves and knowing how to ground ourselves, and some of the tools that I know you're a big advocate for, and supplier of apothecary, for want of a better way of trying to pronounce that word. But I love the sprays, I love the oils, I love how you kind of look at the plants and how we can really live through these possibly very turbulent times, being more grounded and being really connected to our true self, or our true nature deep within ourselves. But then what else can you use, So I'd love to hear a bit more about the plant work. I know we're close out. We've about 10 minutes maybe, or less, 6.
Yeah, that's good. And I'm flexible. Yeah, thanks, Susie. I mean, that's something, having grown up on a farm in northern England, I loved the plants and the flowers and the trees, and was blessed to have a great clinical aromatherapist teacher. I uniquely blend tinctures and oils and in relationship to your birth chart, and the seasons, and I love doing that. How do we do that? Gosh, that's a whole nother way. But simply put, I also blend the time and the date of birth, because your numerology, the time, date, and birth, and the day, month, and year play into that unique vibration. And then think of this like a musical scale, which we can also chart the plant realm. Simply put, that they have vibrational notes, or personalities. So if we think about the trees and any shrub or plant that has deep roots, they're the base notes or frequencies that ground us. So like vetiver and cedarwood and sandalwood and the benzoins, they're earthy, and that's what it's going to do to us, right? It's going to ground us. It's going to bring us right into the here and now. So if we're all floating around, overstimulated in our minds by all the chaos outside, I think coming back into our body, and simply put, go outside and put your feet on the earth, go hug a tree, right? Drink some perhaps herbal tea. There's many things, but the oils are something tangible, and smell and scent and aroma triggers our memory, and so much in our psyche that is instant, right? We feel and smell an instant memory and a grounding. But the trees and shrubs and woods, that's that kind of grounding. The next group would be more the florals, widely spoken, and they think about the middle chakras as well. So kind of from 3, 4, 5, if we're really needing physical help there, with digestion or speaking up, I would blend more with the flowers. And then the top notes are citrus oils. So I'm simplifying it for now. But the trees, shrubs and woods, those lower chakras, the florals, and then we've got the citrus oils. And they relate to evaporation, how quickly we smell them, the volatility. So we can all pick up, an orange and just peel the skin, or a lemon and squeeze it. We smell it, don't we? We smell that scent, but it evaporates. Whereas perhaps the woods and the trees, a sandalwood oil, it takes longer for the nose to smell it. It stays longer. Therefore, it's going to have a different effect on us. And so I love using natural apothecary plants, herbs, tinctures, because they influence and they're quick to use, and they can change our mood and our perception, and our physical being very fast and safely. I mean, we have to be careful, obviously, on safety, but yeah, flower remedies, tinctures in water are a little easier and safer to use than perhaps full-on aromatherapy oils, because they work systemically in the body. So if you're on medication or pregnant, I'd always say consult, a licensed or clinical aromatherapist like myself, just to err on the side of caution before blending your own. Yeah, but thank you. I mean, that's one of my loves. I love playing in that realm of with my guide and muse, Mary Magdalene. I'm blessed here to live on Oahu, Hawaii, and go up to the sacred heiau, the healing temple, and play there in imagination and listen to the guidance and come up with these blends and oils and things. A lot for Janet Connor's community, actually. Yeah, but we'll be working a lot more next year, I think, with that in our program that I'm still putting together, by the way. Yeah.
Here's a message from Janet.
Hey, Janet. Oh, right on cue. Look, her ears must have been burning. I know. I've been really blessed to blend some unique oils and tinctures for Janet Connor's intensives the last, I think 8 years or so. Yeah, very unique, and fun, always fun and joyful to play with Janet and her communities. Yeah, but Susie, yeah, I can blend for individuals as well. And thank you for using that. Yeah, got a little piece of me with you.
Yeah, it's very special, I think, when I like to know that little bottle, like it's nearly gone now, but came all the way from Hawaii. You know what I mean? It's such a beautiful, it really feels like an elixir, it's really special. So I love that you can blend them specifically for people depending on their chart. That's the power of like working with the earth and the elements, for your own natural kind of
definitely. Yeah, earth and
blueprint.
sky, and yeah. And then if somebody's going through, if I can see they're going through a strong Venus transit, or Pluto, maybe Pluto is very strong in their chart, then to support the transformation, to support the changes. Yeah, plant medicine is potent, isn't it? It's powerful. Yeah,
Absolutely.
So we are coming to an end. We're a minute or so away from the hour. Do you have any what do you call it? Any events that are happening, things that you'd like to talk about?
Yeah, thank you.
On a journey, other than just going onto your website and By the way, there's a lot of information over there for whoever's watching. Please do check out emmakupumitchell.com. The banner is at the bottom. And Emma, if you have anything to share with us.
Yeah, thank you, Ramsey. And I'm going through a lot of change myself in some of the offerings. So I would say go to the website on the homepage, sign up for my newsletter, because there's a lot solidifying. But one big event that I always offer with Janet and Kathy this year, and one of my dear teachers, Marcia Wade, we always put together the astrology of the next year. And it's a forecast that isn't really a forecast. It keeps evolving into something much more. I think this year we're beginning the recording soon. So that will be probably coming out late November, early December. So sign up for my newsletter, Kathy's, Janet's, and we'd love to have people sign up and join for that. That's the astrology forecast of 2025. That isn't a forecast, but it's so much more, because you're going to have probably 3 or 4 parts of interesting mythology from Marcia, me with more the symbolic kind of weaving of numerology and the astrology, and then Kathy with the oracle wisdom. So I think that's the biggest concrete event that's happening, and it will be online, self-paced. So people can just purchase that one-time purchase, and then they'll have part 1 that they'll be able to watch by the beginning of December, then part 2, part 3. So wherever you are in the world, you can listen at your own time and own pace and get a little heads up about what is in store energetic-wise next year.
That is awesome. Emma, that was an amazing show. We're really blessed for having you on. Thank you so much for accepting our invite. You know, I know Kathy worked so hard to get you in.
It's my pleasure and honor. What a treat. It's so good to see you all. And thank you all for doing the amazing work that you are. So needed.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And hopefully we'll get to do this again next year.
Absolutely. Anytime. It'd be my pleasure.
All right. Thank you so much. Thanks to our listeners. And that's the end of our and thank you.